Imagine this. You've just buried your mother, your heart ripped in two, only to find out your own father skipped the funeral to jet off with his mistress. That alone would be devastating, right? But then, that very same night, my phone buzzed with a message from her number. I'm not dead. Come to the cemetery. Now. What I saw next made my blood run absolutely cold. Okay, so let me back up a little. My name is Oliver Harris. I'm 33, and I live in Portland, Oregon. On the surface, my life was picture perfect. I'm an architect at a top firm, married to my amazing wife, Audrey, a psychologist with the warmest smile, and we have our 5-year-old son, Nathan, whose bright eyes constantly ask why. We had this beautiful wooden home by the river, filled with morning light and laughter. Most mornings, I'd be making coffee, listening to Audrey and Nathan giggle in the kitchen, feeling truly blessed. But you know how it is. No picture is ever truly perfect. There are always shadows. And for me, those shadows started with my parents. My father, Leonard Harris, was a legend in Portland real estate. Harris Capital, his investment company, was huge. He was 65, always impeccable in his tailored suits, his voice calm, sharp, every word calculated. To the world, he was success incarnate. To me, he was a stone wall, cold, unapproachable. He made me feel like I was never quite good enough. I remember once, I was 25 and won my first design award. I was so excited, practically bursting, to show him. He barely glanced at it. Good job, Oliver, he said, his tone flat. But working for someone else is just working for someone else. That cut deep. I was used to it, though. To him, I was just an architect, not the heir to his empire. He wanted me to take over, but I refused. I didn't want to become another Leonard Harris. My mother, Eleanor, was his complete opposite. At 62, she still had the gentle grace of an art teacher. Retired, she spent her days painting and nurturing her backyard garden. Weekends with Audrey and Nathan at my parents' house were my sanctuary. Mom would take Nathan to the garden, teaching him to plant wild daisies, while I'd fix something around the house for her. Dad was usually busy with work, rarely joining us. In those quiet moments, Mom would look at me, her smile a warm embrace, and say, "You're my pride, Oliver. No matter what your father says, I know you've chosen the right path." She was always the mediator, always trying to soften the blows my father delivered. When he'd get angry about my choices, Mom would gently pull me aside, hand me a cup of tea, and transport me with stories of her vibrant youth, of being a passionate teacher, showing her students the beauty in simple things. She was my light, my anchor, the one who made me believe I didn't need to prove myself to anyone, especially not to him. My life felt precariously balanced between the happy days with Audrey and Nathan and the chilling shadow of my father. I tried to ignore his cutting words, his disappointed stares. I told myself I had everything, a loving family, meaningful work, and a mother who adored me. But deep down, I knew this peace was fragile, like a pane of glass. One wrong move, and it could all shatter. That fateful morning started like any other. I was at the office, buzzing with ideas for a new green urban project. My team was on board, my boss was laughing, everything felt right. Then my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I usually ignore calls during meetings, but something about its persistent ring drilled into me. A knot of dread tightened in my stomach. I excused myself, stepped into the hall, and answered. "Hello, is this Mr. Oliver Harris?" The voice was a woman's, trembling, trying to hold herself together. My stomach dropped. "I'm a nurse from Portland General Hospital. I'm so sorry to inform you that your mother, Mrs. Eleanor Harris, passed away this morning. She suffered a sudden cardiac arrest. We did everything we could, but the rest was a blur." Her words faded into a distant, distorted hum, like I was drowning. My heart pounded, blood rushed to my ears. The world, it just collapsed. "No," I whispered, my voice cracking. "No, you're mistaken. My mother can't." I stopped, realizing I was talking to myself. The nurse was still apologizing, but I couldn't hear. "Are you saying my mother died of a heart attack?" I forced the words out, hoping if I asked enough times, the answer would change. "How? She was healthy. No history of heart problems." Are you sure it's my Eleanor Harris? Yes, sir, the nurse replied, her voice filled with pity. I'm so sorry. Can you come to the hospital now? We need you to complete some paperwork. I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. I hung up, frozen in the hallway, still clutching my phone. Laughter from the meeting room, sunlight streaming through the window, the traffic outside. It all felt alien, like I was trapped in a nightmare. I don't remember leaving the office or what I said to anyone. All I know is I bolted to my car and drove in a daze. Rain started to fall, streaking down the windshield like the sky itself was crying with me. One question hammered in my brain. How come Mom be gone? How could someone so full of life just vanish? I pressed the gas. Portland's familiar streets felt alien now, veiled in heavy gray rain. The wipers shrieked, a frantic heartbeat trying to pull me back to reality. But my mind was lost. I couldn't accept it. My gentle mother, with her soil-stained hands and sun-warm voice, couldn't be taken by some senseless heart attack. My chest felt crushed. My breathing was ragged. I was falling into a bottomless abyss. I wanted to scream, to lash out, but I could only drive, as if clinging to the illusion that keeping the car on the road might somehow control the chaos raging inside me. It didn't. Nothing could. Memories flooded back. 10-year-old me at the kitchen table, my mom, floral apron, paintbrush in hand. Oliver, look at this, she'd say, her voice soft. Every line tells a story. You don't need to draw perfectly. Just draw with your heart. Those afternoons, scribbling houses and trees, with her praising my clumsy sketches. That's where my love for architecture began. But then my father would walk in, his cold eyes scanning my drawings. What's the point of all this doodling, Eleanor? He needs to learn to work seriously, not daydream like you. Mom would just squeeze my hand, silently telling me I didn't need to prove anything. But his words, they left small scars. Now the rain outside intensified, threatening to swallow my car whole. I dialed my father's number, desperate for answers. It rang and rang, each unanswered ring a fresh stab to my chest. Why wasn't he picking up? Where was he? Did he even know about Mom? I couldn't finish the thought. A dark cloud of dread settled in. My father was always in control. Could he know something I didn't? The drive to Portland General Hospital was an eternity. My hand shook so violently I could barely open the car door. I ran into the lobby, breath ragged, heart pounding. A receptionist, as if expecting me, directed me down a long, antiseptic-smelling corridor. And there he was, Leonard Harris, in a perfectly tailored gray suit, talking to a doctor. Calm, too calm, like he was closing a real estate deal, not discussing his wife's death. Dad, I choked. What's going on? Is she really? He turned, his eyes cold as stone. Oliver, you're here. The doctor was just explaining. Your mother had a heart attack. Stroke. They couldn't save her. His voice was steady, not a hint of tremor. No grief. Nothing. I searched his face for any sign of loss, any human emotion. Nothing. Just an impassive wall. The doctor, a middle-aged man with thin glasses, added, I'm so sorry, Mr. Harris. Mrs. Eleanor was brought here this morning. Her heart had stopped before we could intervene. No warning signs. A sudden stroke. Sudden, I nearly shouted, startling both of them. My mother had no history of heart problems. Weeks ago, she was playing with my son, planting flowers, laughing. How could she? Who brought her here? What happened? My father cut me off, his voice sharp. That's enough, Oliver. Don't make a scene. Your mother is gone. Now we need to handle the paperwork and maintain the family's dignity. Understood. Dignity? My mother had just died, and he was worried about dignity? I wanted to scream, to grab him, to shake answers out of him. But I just stood there, stunned. A nurse approached, handing me a bag of Mom's personal belongings. Her small wallet, the pearl earring she loved, a handkerchief embroidered with daisies. I clutched that handkerchief, feeling my heart crush. The faint scent of her perfume lingered, as if she were still close. My father, meanwhile, pulled out his phone, stepping away to speak with someone. I watched his retreating back. A chill snaked down my spine. Something was terribly wrong. He was too calm, too detached. The woman he'd lived with for over 30 years was gone, yet he was signing papers, making calls, as if it were just another workday. I sank into a waiting room chair, Mom's belongings still in my lap. The hospital hummed around me, but I felt utterly alone. I looked down at the daisies, images of Mom's radiant smile mixing with Dad's cold stare. The bad feeling grew stronger. Her death wasn't simple. I didn't know why, but I felt it deep in my bones. 3 days later, I stood at the cemetery on the outskirts of Portland. The sky was a heavy, mournful gray, as if holding its breath. The rain had stopped, but the air was thick, damp, suffocating. I'd handled everything for the funeral: the coffin, the flowers, the arrangements. All of it. My father? He didn't lift a finger. He called the night before, his voice curt. "I'm tied up with estate paperwork. Can you handle it?" I clenched my jaw, forced out a yes, but inside I was screaming. How could he be so heartless? This was his wife, the woman who stood by him for 3 decades, and paperwork was his excuse? I greeted relatives and Mom's old friends at the gate. They hugged me, offered condolences I couldn't truly absorb. Eleanor was wonderful, too sudden. We'll miss her smile. Each word twisted the knife in my heart, confirming Mom was truly gone. But what stung even more were the whispers behind my back. Where's Leonard? Why isn't he here? So strange, a husband skipping his wife's funeral. I heard it all, but kept my head down, trying to maintain that dignity my father had demanded. I just didn't want our brokenness on full display. Audrey stood beside me, her hand a lifeline, gripping mine tightly. She didn't say much, just squeezed, her quiet presence my only anchor. Nathan, our little boy, looked lost in his too big black suit. "Daddy, where's Grandma?" he asked, his voice small, confused. I knelt, pulled him into my arms, fighting back tears. "Grandma's in a beautiful place now, buddy, planting daisies in heaven." He nodded, but I knew he didn't understand. How could a 5-year-old comprehend such a void? When Mom's coffin was brought out, my legs turned to stone. Oh, covered in white daisies, her favorite. I walked behind it, each step impossibly heavy, like I was walking a path with no end. People around me bowed their heads, some openly sobbing, but all I heard was the thunderous pounding of my own heart. As the coffin was slowly lowered into the earth, I couldn't hold back anymore. Tears streamed down my face, hot and relentless. It was too sudden, too senseless, like a book ripped apart mid-story. Audrey wrapped her arms around me. "You're not alone, Oliver. I'm here. Nathan's here." I nodded, but I felt hollow. I wanted to scream, to demand answers, to know why. But I just stood there, watching the shovels of earth bury not just her, but a piece of my own life. My father never showed. Not a call, not a text, not a word. I had hoped, even a tiny sliver of hope, that he'd appear. Even if he didn't cry, even if just to maintain the facade. But no, Leonard Harris was conspicuously absent. His absence was a stinging slap in the face, a betrayal of everything Mom had sacrificed. After the funeral, Audrey, Nathan, and I went home. Our beautiful wooden house, once filled with joy, now felt suffocatingly silent. Audrey made me tea, her eyes swimming with worry. "Are you okay?" she asked. I just shook my head, unable to speak. I picked up my phone, scrolling aimlessly, searching for anything to anchor me. Then, almost by instinct, I opened my father's social media. Something I rarely did. It was usually just boring photos of buildings or wine tastings. But this time, I froze. A photo. My father, white suit, standing beside a woman, far too young for him, probably in her 30s. They were on a balcony, smiling brightly, wine glasses sparkling. The caption was short, sharp, a new chapter in life. My blood ran cold. My breath hitched. My mother had been buried hours ago, and he, her husband, was publicly flaunting a new chapter with a stranger. Rage erupted. I wanted to smash the phone, to scream, to confront him right then. Audrey saw my face. "Well, what's wrong?" I handed her the phone, speechless. Her eyes widened. Then slowly, she lowered it, her own disbelief palpable. The pain inside me morphed into a wildfire. I walked to the bookshelf, to an old framed wedding photo of my parents. Mom, young and radiant. Dad, stern, but I once thought he looked at her with love. I I touched the frame, my fingers trembling. "Mom," I whispered, "what happened to you? Why is he doing this?" My gaze hardened. A part of my heart turned to ice. The bad feeling wasn't an undercurrent anymore. It was a roaring storm. My mother's death wasn't random. I knew it. Deep in my core, the truth was hidden. And I, Oliver Harris, would uncover every single dark piece of it. By the way, if you're still here, holding your breath like I was, make sure to hit that subscribe button. More stories, even crazier than this one, are always coming. That night, after Audrey was asleep and the house was swallowed by darkness, I sat alone in the living room. In my hands, I held the bag of Mom's personal belongings, her wallet, her pearl earrings, that daisy-embroidered handkerchief. Simple things, yet they held the weight of her entire life. I opened the wallet, my fingers brushing over an old photo of Nathan and me. More tears welled up, but I clenched my jaw. I didn't want to cry anymore. I wanted answers. Why was she gone? Why was Dad acting like she meant nothing? Then my phone buzzed. A sharp, cold sound that shattered the profound silence. I looked at the screen. My heart stopped. It was Mom's number. Unmistakable. The message was short. Brutal. "I'm not dead. Come to my grave now." I froze. My hands trembled so violently, I nearly dropped the phone. Was this a cruel, sick joke? A glitch? Mom was dead. I'd seen her coffin. Felt the cold. Earth on my face. Where is this message coming from? I stared at the screen, willing it to give me answers. Then, with shaking fingers, I called the number back. It rang once. Twice. Then abruptly cut off. Someone was on the other end, but they didn't want to talk. I called again. And again. Nothing but silence. But something ignited inside me. A powerful, primal instinct. I stopped thinking. I just acted. I snatched a flashlight, threw on a raincoat, and burst out the door. Audrey was still sleeping, and I didn't want to wake her. I didn't know what I was doing, only that I had to get to that cemetery. I had to find the truth. My car sped through the night, a light rain blurring the windshield. The road to the cemetery was pitch black, lit only by my weak headlights. My heart hammered against my ribs, threatening to explode. The cemetery loomed, cold and eerie, rows of tombstones fading into the gloom like silent specters. I parked, stepped out. The rain soaked my coat, chilling me to the bone, but I didn't care. My flashlight beam cut through the darkness, illuminating the dirt path to Mom's grave. Each step felt like 1,000 pounds. I had to know. I had to see. As I neared her grave, I froze. A figure stood there, a few meters away. Frail, trembling, but achingly familiar. I aimed a flashlight. The beam found her face. My mother. It was her. Thinner, her hair matted with rain, but her eyes still bright, still warm, still my mother. I stood there, rooted to the spot, unable to breathe, unable to believe my own eyes. This couldn't be real. I had buried her. "Oliver," she whispered, her voice faint but clear. Then she broke into sobs, her frail shoulders shaking. I rushed forward, wrapping my arms around her. Tears streamed down my face, uncontrollably. She felt so real. The warmth of her body, the faint scent of her perfume, the embrace I thought I'd lost forever. It was overwhelming. I clung to her, crying, terrified that if I let go, she'd vanish like a dream. "Mom! Mom!" I could only repeat, my voice breaking. "How? How are you alive?" She took my hand, her fingers cold but firm. She looked into my eyes, a fierce mix of pain and resolve. "You can't tell anyone I'm alive," she whispered, her voice trembling, as if afraid the very air might overhear. "I'll explain everything, Oliver." I had a reason to fake my death. I was stunned. 1,000 questions screamed in my mind. A plan? Who helped her? Why this? And why me? Trusting me with this impossible secret? I wanted to ask, to understand, but no words would come out. The rain continued, light and cold, cloaking us in a thin veil of mist. We stood there, beside her freshly covered grave, two lost ghosts in a surreal, waking dream. Fear and mystery enveloped me. But in that moment, one truth shone clear: my mother was alive. Suddenly, she pulled my hand, urging me away from the dim glow of my flashlight. "It's not safe here," she whispered, her voice trembling but resolute. Follow me, Oliver. We need to talk. I nodded, my mind reeling. I followed her through the rows of tombstones, down a narrow path leading out of the cemetery. The rain soaked through my coat, but I felt no cold. Only shock, mingled with unbearable joy and an unnamed, chilling fear. She led me to an old, faded silver sedan, unlike any car our family owned, parked around the corner. She opened the door, gestured for me to get in. I hesitated, staring at her, still struggling to believe she was truly there, flesh and blood. Mom, are you okay? I asked, my voice faltering. She only nodded, her eyes a tense mix of tenderness and urgency. Get in, son. I'll explain. We drove off into the night. She was behind the wheel, and I sat beside her, clutching that daisy-embroidered handkerchief, trying to process. The house she took me to was tucked away in a quiet corner of Portland's outskirts, hidden by old oak trees. Small, weathered, chipped tile roof, heavy curtains. It was nothing like the sprawling mansion she'd shared with my father. She cut the engine, scanned the surroundings, then led me inside. The interior was sparse, almost empty. A wooden table, a few chairs, a fold-out bed. So different from her previous life. She poured me a glass of water. I didn't drink. I just sat, watching her, waiting. She sat across from me, her thin hands clasped tightly, as if trying to keep herself from falling apart. I know you're angry, she began, her voice raw. Angry that I hid this, that I let you endure the pain of losing me. But you have to understand, Oliver. I had no other choice. I shook my head, fighting back the surge of emotions. Mom, why? Why did you do this? Why fake your death? And Dad, does he have anything to do with this? Just saying his name made my blood boil. The image of him and that young woman, a new chapter twisted in my gut. Mom took a deep, shaky breath, her eyes darkening as if sifting through painful memories. It started a few months ago, she said. Your father, he changed, Oliver. Colder, more ruthless. I found out he was having an affair. A young woman named Vanessa from his company. I clenched my fists. I'd suspected, yes, that photo. But hearing her confirm, it was a physical blow. He wasn't even sneaking around, she continued, her voice trembling with anger and pain. It was blatant, like he wanted to humiliate me. When I confronted him, he didn't deny it. Instead, he threatened me. He wanted me to sign over assets, shares in the company, properties, everything in my name. He said, if I didn't agree, I'd disappear. Disappear? I choked. You mean, Dad threatened to kill you? She nodded, tears tracing paths down her cheeks. I wasn't sure if he'd actually go through with it, but I felt the danger. He started watching me, Oliver. I found hidden cameras. In the bedroom. In the living room. He'd fly into rages out of nowhere. Once, he even shoved me when I refused to sign the papers. One night, he completely lost control, screaming that I'd regret not obeying him. That's when I knew. I had to protect myself. I sat in stunned silence. The world crumbling, again. My father, the man I thought was just controlling and cold. Could he be this cruel? I remembered his emotionless gaze at the hospital, how he'd rushed through paperwork. I had an old friend at Portland General Hospital, she continued, her voice gaining a fragile steadiness, as if recounting a carefully rehearsed plan. Her name is Martha. I told her everything. She agreed to help. We planned a fake heart attack. Our housekeeper had no idea, so when I collapsed, she panicked and called for help immediately. Everything went perfectly. At the hospital, Martha recorded my cardiac arrest and helped me escape through a back exit. They used a mannequin to substitute the body. Everyone, including your father, believed I was dead. My head spun. Mom, you planned all of this? But why didn't you tell me? Do you know how much it hurt to think you were gone? My voice broke, torn between anger and overwhelming love. All those sleepless nights, the tears at the funeral. She let me suffer through it all, without a single hint. She lowered her head, tears streaming. I'm so sorry, Oliver. I wanted to tell you, but I couldn't risk it. Your father, he's too dangerous. If he suspected even the slightest thing, I don't know what would have happened. I chose you because I knew you wouldn't abandon me. Because you're the only one I trust. I looked at her, my heart ripped in two. I pitied her, this woman forced to stage her own death to survive. But I was also angry. Angry at being kept in the dark. Angry at my father, the man I called Dad, for pushing her to this point. His perfectly tailored suits, his cold smile, they weren't just controlling anymore. They felt sinister. She gripped my hand, her eyes resolute. I had no other choice, Oliver. Faking my death was the only way to survive, and to make him let his guard down. But now, I need you. We have to uncover the truth before he finds out I'm still alive. I stood there, frozen. Each word from my mother cut through the shock, embedding itself like a knife. Outside, the rain hammered the tin roof, a rhythmic counterpoint to our ragged breaths. The dim yellow light in that small, unfamiliar house carved shadows onto her gaunt face, highlighting the fierce lines of fear, yes, but also immense resilience. I looked at her, the woman I thought I'd lost forever, and a cold fire ignited in my chest. Pain, rage, and an overwhelming love for my mother fused into a single, sharp determination. I would protect her, and I would make Leonard Harris pay for every single thing he'd done. But I knew this wasn't about impulsive action. If Mom was right, if Dad was truly this dangerous, we needed more than anger. We needed evidence. A bulletproof plan. I gripped her hand, my voice steadier than I felt. Mom, I'll do whatever it takes. But what do you need me to do? Where do we start? She sighed, her eyes sweeping the sparse room as if searching for an anchor point. Evidence, Oliver. Evidence of everything he's done. Not just to me, but everything he's hidden in the past. Your father is careful, but he's overconfident now. He thinks I'm dead, that no one stands in his way. This is our chance. I nodded, my mind still a whirlpool. Every fiber of my being screamed to confront him right then. But she was right. We had to be smart. Strategic. I'll keep this secret, Mom. I promise, my voice firm. Not Audrey. Not Nathan. No one. But you have to promise me you won't disappear again. I can't. I can't handle losing you a second time. She gave a sad, tender smile, gently stroking my cheek, just like she did when I was a child. I promise, Oliver. From now on, I won't hide anything from you. Returning home that night, I felt like I was living in two completely separate worlds. One was my warm wooden house by the Willamette River, where Audrey and Nathan slept soundly, where I once believed everything was perfect. The other was a churning, dark storm where my mother had been forced to fake her own death, and where my father, the man I called Dad, was far more ruthless, more dangerous than I had ever imagined. I slipped into the house quietly, not wanting to disturb Audrey. She lay peacefully, her breathing even, but I couldn't join her. I sat in the living room, staring at Mom's framed photo on our small altar, wrestling with the impossible secret I now carried. How could I keep this from the wife I loved more than anything? The next morning, I tried to act normal. Brewed coffee, made toast for Nathan, drove him to preschool. Audrey looked at me, her eyes filled with concern. Are you okay, Oliver? She asked, her hand resting lightly on my shoulder. You look like you haven't slept. I forced a smile, trying to mask the tension that vibrated through me. I'm fine, honey. Just still not used to Mom being gone. She hugged me, and a pang of guilt, sharp and swift, pierced me. But I had promised Mom. I couldn't risk it. Not because I didn't trust Audrey, but because any small mistake could put my mother's life in even greater danger. Meanwhile, Mom remained hidden in that suburban house, communicating with me only through an encrypted phone an old friend had given her. Every message made my heart race, like I was living in a spy thriller. Don't call directly. Only text when necessary. And be careful, Oliver. Your father isn't easily fooled. While Mom lived like a ghost, my father, Leonard Harris, was flaunting a life of lavish indulgence. I kept tabs on him through social media. Each post was a new stab to my heart. There he was, on a yacht in California, arm around Vanessa, smiling as if he'd never lost his wife of 3 decades. Another post, from Vegas, a glass of wine in hand, captioned, "Freedom is living true to yourself." I gripped my phone, wanting to smash it, but I forced myself to stay calm. Mom was right. He was overconfident. That was our biggest advantage. I decided to use his absence. The family mansion, the place I grew up, where Mom once tended her daisy garden, became my target. I knew Dad had a private study where he kept all his important documents. If there was any evidence of his crimes, it would be there. One evening, after Audrey and Nathan were asleep, I drove to the mansion. The night was pitch black. Only faint streetlights illuminated the long driveway. I still had a key, of course, but I didn't dare turn on any lights. I slipped inside, my heart thumping, feeling like a thief in my own childhood home. Dad's study was on the second floor, behind a heavy oak door with an electronic lock. Luckily, I knew the code. Mom's birthday. A detail that now felt both bitter and cruelly ironic. Inside, the room was exactly as I remembered. A massive wooden desk, shelves overflowing with binders, the faint scent of leather. I began my search, meticulously, careful not to disturb a single thing. Drawers were filled with contracts, invoices, routine business documents. But I knew Dad. He always hid the truly important things where no one would ever think to look. After almost an hour, my fingers brushed against something odd. A panel on the wall behind the desk. It felt slightly out of place. I tapped it gently. A hollow sound. My heart leaped into my throat. Using a letter opener, I carefully pried it open. Behind it was a small, old safe with a combination lock. I tried everything. Dad's birthday, mine, Mom's. None worked. Finally, I tried their wedding anniversary. The safe clicked open, dry and final. Inside was a treasure trove of dark secrets. Bank statements revealed massive transfers to offshore accounts, Switzerland, the Cayman Islands, places I'd only heard of in financial scandals. There were forged contracts bearing my mother's signature, transferring shares and properties she had never agreed to. But what truly chilled me to the bone was a small USB drive, an old stack of newspapers, and a few cassette tapes. I plugged the USB into my laptop, my hands trembling. An audio file appeared, recorded over 20 years ago. I pressed play. Dad's voice roared through the speakers, harsh, full of anger. You think you can control me forever, Charles? This fortune belongs to me, not you or your daughter. My grandfather's voice, calm but firm, responded, Leonard, you won't touch a cent unless Eleanor agrees. You know that. The argument escalated, Dad's threats growing darker, until the recording abruptly cut off. I opened a stack of newspapers. My heart hammered. Local papers, over 20 years old. Headlines screaming about a car accident that killed my grandparents. Mom had told me they died during a business trip, her voice heavy with grief. At the time, I thought it was a random tragedy. But now, piecing it together, the recording, Dad's venomous tone, the accident just days later, a horrifying suspicion began to take root. Was my father directly involved? Did he engineer their deaths to seize Mom's inheritance? I photographed everything, backed up all the data to my phone and a spare hard drive. Then I drove back to Mom's hidden house, my heart a lead weight. When I told her, she sat silently, her trembling hands clutching a glass of water. I always suspected, she whispered, tears streaming down her face. I always felt my parents' deaths weren't normal, but I had no proof, and I couldn't bring myself to believe Leonard could go that far. I took her hand, feeling the world crumble yet again. Mom, we're not just dealing with a cheating husband, I said, my voice shaking with pure, cold anger. We're dealing with someone who's been hiding crimes for 20 years. Maybe more. She nodded, her eyes no longer just sorrowful, but burning with a fierce resolve. We'll expose him, Oliver. For me, for you, and for everyone he's hurt. I looked at my mother, a woman who had endured so much, who had literally walked through death to survive. And a fire ignited in my chest. Not the blind rage of before, but a cold, sharpened determination, like a blade honed to perfection. My father, Leonard Harris, had built an empire on lies, on betrayal, and on crimes I hadn't dared to imagine. But now he would face the truth, and my mother and I, we would be the ones to pull back the curtain. I gripped her hand, my voice firm, resolute. Mom, we'll do this the right way. No impulsiveness. No letting emotions take over. We need to build a solid case, so when he falls, he won't get back up. She gave a faint but steadfast smile. You're truly my son, Oliver. Always thorough. Always thinking before acting. I know someone who can help us. Charlotte Wells, a lawyer specializing in finance and estates. She was my best friend in college. If anyone knows how to deal with men like your father, it's Charlotte. I nodded, a flicker of hope igniting in the darkness. So where do we start, Mom? The documents I found, the bank statements, the forged contracts, the recording, are they enough? They're enough to start, she said, her eyes lighting up. But we need more. Your father is careful. He won't let himself be caught easily. We need additional evidence, and we need to do everything legally so when the truth comes out, he can't escape. The days that followed felt like I was living two separate lives. By day, I was Oliver Harris, architect, husband, father, dropping Nathan at preschool, laughing with Audrey, hunched over blueprints at Urban Vision. But by night, I transformed into something else entirely. A truth seeker, quietly, meticulously, piecing together a puzzle to dismantle my father's empire. Leonard, meanwhile, seemed utterly oblivious. I kept tabs on him through social media. He continued to post his lavish lifestyle. On a yacht in Malibu, dining by candlelight with Vanessa, strolling on a beach. Each photo was a fresh stab to my heart, but also an opportunity. He was overconfident, just as Mom said. He truly believed he'd escaped all constraints. That Mom was dead, that no one stood in his way. He didn't know that every smug smile he posted only fueled my determination. It was time to act. First, I reached out to Charlotte Wells, Mom's lawyer friend. We met at an inconspicuous cafe on the outskirts of Portland. Charlotte was in her 50s, silver-haired, with eyes as sharp as a hawk's. As I recounted Mom's story, the fake death, Dad's threats, the documents I'd found, she listened with intense focus, taking notes, her expression unreadable. When I handed her the copies of the bank statements, the forged contracts, the audio recording, she finally spoke. This is a big case, Oliver. Leonard Harris isn't just an adulterer. If what you're saying is true, he could be running an illegal financial network. But we need more evidence. And we need to do this strictly by the book. Charlotte immediately set to work, transforming my scattered evidence into a coherent internal investigation file. She categorized the bank statements, scrutinized every forged contract, and hired an audio expert to verify the recording. That recording is crucial, she told me. It clearly shows Leonard's intent, but we need to tie it to specific actions. Can you get more data from his company? I knew it was dangerous. Harris Capital was a fortress, tight security, fiercely loyal staff. But I had one advantage. I was Leonard Harris's son. Even if he never saw me as his heir, I still had limited access to some company systems from past design collaborations. One evening, I returned to Harris Capital's headquarters. My excuse? Retrieving old design documents. Frank, the middle-aged security guard, greeted me warmly. Haven't seen you in a while. Oliver, he said, friendly as ever. I smiled, forcing a casual air. Yeah, I just need to grab some blueprints. Dad asked me to check an old project. Frank let me in without a second thought. I went straight to the 10th floor, to Dad's office. The room was vast, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Portland, but I had no time for the view. I sat at his desk, powered on his computer, and used a backup password I'd once seen him enter during a family meeting. Miraculously, it still worked. I sifted through files, my heart pounding with every creak in the hallway. Then, I found it, a hidden folder, encrypted. I tried several combinations. Nothing. Then, almost on a whim, I typed Vanessa. The folder unlocked. Inside, countless emails, invoices, and records of anonymous offshore investment funds. My eyes widened. This was gold. I copied everything to a USB drive, my hand shaking so badly I almost dropped it. This was proof of under-the-table transactions, money that never touched Harris Capital's official books. Meanwhile, Mom was working her own angles. She secretly contacted an old friend in the tax authority, a man named Robert, who had worked under my grandfather. She sent him copies of the documents I'd found. A few days later, Robert called back, his voice grave. Eleanor, what you sent me is a bombshell. Leonard has 4 offshore accounts totaling over $30 million unreported. This is clear evidence of money laundering and tax evasion. I'll pass this to federal agencies, but you and Oliver need to be careful. If Leonard finds out what you're doing, he won't hold back. Charlotte accelerated the process. She filed an anonymous complaint with the Securities and Exchange Commission and the IRS, initiating a temporary asset freeze on Leonard. He won't know what's happening until it's too late, she said, her eyes gleaming like a warrior. We're planting a legal bomb under his feet, and it's about to go off. In the meantime, I decided to stir the pot on social media. Using an anonymous account, I began leaking hints about Harris Capital, vague suggestions of investment fraud, questions about the mysterious origins of Leonard Harris's wealth. I didn't directly accuse him. I just let the press and public start digging. Soon, articles started appearing. Is Harris Capital hiding something? Questions surround transparency of real estate. Empire. Shareholders grew uneasy. The company's stock dipped. I knew Dad was starting to feel the pressure. One morning, a message from Charlotte. The FBI has launched a federal investigation. They're reviewing all the documents we sent. Leonard doesn't know yet, but he'll be summoned soon. I sank into a chair, gripping my phone, and whispered to myself, now he'll know what it feels like to lose control. My father, though, continued his vacation. I saw his latest post, a photo of him on a beach, cocktail in hand. But then I saw the news. Reporters were swarming him, asking about Harris Capital, offshore accounts, fraud allegations. He was still smiling, still brushing off the questions. But I knew that smile masked sheer panic. He was losing control, and for the first time in my life, I felt like I held the upper hand. I called my mother, my voice trembling with a mix of excitement and anxiety. Mom, everything's falling into place. The FBI is involved. He won't get away. She was silent for a moment, then spoke, her voice both resolute and profoundly pained. Good, Oliver. But remember, this isn't about revenge. This is about justice. For me, for your grandparents, and for everything he's destroyed. I nodded, though she couldn't see me. Justice. The word echoed in my mind, a guiding flame. The legal storm we had quietly planted finally erupted. One morning, I switched on the TV and saw my father's face on the local news. Leonard Harris, chairman of Harris Capital, accused of investment fraud and money laundering. The anchor's voice was cold and sharp. Major newspapers blared the story. Real estate empire collapses. The dark secrets of Leonard Harris. I sat silently, clutching my coffee mug, feeling a strange mix of relief and tension. Harris Capital plunged into crisis. Dad's bank accounts were frozen. His strategic partners, who once clapped him on the back at lavish parties, swiftly pulled their investments, canceled contracts. The company's stock plummeted. Social media exploded with critical posts, angry comments from shareholders. My father, the man who always controlled everything, was now cornered, like a beast backed against a wall. I imagined him perhaps in some luxury hotel in the Bahamas, reading those headlines, realizing his empire was crumbling piece by piece. Then a message from Charlotte. Leonard has returned to Portland. He's trying to contact lawyers, but no one will take his case. The FBI is about to issue an arrest warrant. Be ready, Oliver. This will be over soon. My heart hammered. Over. The word sounded both sweet and terrifying. I wanted my father to pay yes, but I couldn't deny he had once been my father. That afternoon, my phone buzzed. It was him. I stared at his name on the screen, feeling as if my heart would stop. I answered, my voice cold. Dad, Oliver. His voice was hoarse, stripped of its usual measured calm. Have you seen the news? It's all lies. They're trying to ruin me. You have to help me, Oliver. I listened, each word a fresh cut. He didn't ask about Mom, didn't mention her death, showed no shred of remorse, just the raw panic of a man losing everything. I took a deep breath, keeping my voice steady. Dad, I'm not sure what I can do, but if you want, we can meet and talk face to face. At the mansion, tonight. He was silent for a moment, then agreed, his voice thick with suspicion. Fine. 8 o'clock. Don't let me down, Oliver. I hung up, my hands trembling. This was it. The opportunity. Not just to confront him, but to show him the truth. That mom was alive. That his crimes were finally exposed. I texted my mother, tonight. Mansion, are you ready? Her reply came instantly. I'm ready, Oliver. But be careful. He won't accept defeat easily. At 8 p.m., I stood before the family mansion. The place that had once been my home, my mother's home, even my father's. Now it felt cold, a mere shadow of its past. I stepped inside, flipped on the light, feeling like I was entering a battlefield. Dad was already there, sitting in the living room. His gray suit wrinkled, his eyes bloodshot, as if he hadn't slept in days. A glass of whiskey sat before him, untouched. He just stared into the amber liquid, searching for answers. Oliver, he said, his voice weary. You're here. I need your help. The company's collapsing. It's all because of jealous rivals. You have to stand by me. I stood still, looking at the man who had once embodied power in my eyes. Now he seemed small, frail, a wounded animal, but I felt no pity, only cold rage. Dad, I said, my voice icy. Before we talk about the company, don't you have anything to say about Mom? About what you did to her? He frowned, a flicker of irritation in his bloodshot eyes. Your mother is dead, Oliver. You know that. Don't drag up the past to blame me. I gave a faint, bitter smile. The knife twisted in my heart. Dead? Are you sure? I turned and opened the living room door. And my mother stepped in. Eleanor Harris. Flesh and blood. Not a hallucination. She stood there, frail but resolute, her eyes blazing as they locked onto my father. He staggered back, the whiskey glass crashing to the floor, shattering. He nearly collapsed, clutching the armchair, his face pale as if he'd seen a ghost. Eleanor, he whispered, his voice trembling. No, it's impossible. You're dead. My mother stepped forward, her voice sharp and cold. Leonard, did you think you could kill me so easily? Did you think you could take everything, my assets, my family, even my life, without paying a price? He shook his head, his eyes darting between panic and fury. What are you talking about? Is this some kind of joke? Oliver, you're behind this, aren't you? You two are conspiring to frame me. I stepped forward, standing shoulder to shoulder with Mom, my voice calm but heavy with the weight of truth. Dad, stop pretending. We know everything. The offshore accounts, the forged contracts, how you threatened Mom to seize her assets. And then there are my grandparents. Did you really think their car accident would stay a secret forever? Mom continued, her voice trembling with pain, but firm. Leonard, I once loved you. I thought you were just ambitious. But you killed my parents, didn't you? For their fortune. And you plan to do the same to me. He laughed. A hollow, desperate sound. You're both insane. I didn't kill anyone. It was an accident. And you, Eleanor, you think you can stage a fake death to ruin me? You have no proof. I pulled out my phone and pressed play. The audio file. The argument between him and my grandfather from over 20 years ago. His voice, filled with resentment, threatening my grandfather over the family fortune. As he listened, his face paled further. He still tried to shout, That proves nothing. You're slandering me. But before he could say another word, the wail of police sirens pierced the night. The front door burst open. Federal agents stormed in, guns holstered, their eyes cold and unyielding. An officer stepped forward, holding up an arrest warrant. Leonard Harris, you're under arrest for money laundering, investment fraud, and accessory to murder. He was handcuffed right there in the very house that had once been the ultimate symbol of his power. Reporters were already waiting outside, cameras flashing, capturing the moment the man once hailed as Portland's icon of success was led away like a common criminal. As they escorted him out, my father turned back, his eyes a venomous mix of hatred and desperation. You'll regret this, Eleanor, he growled. But my mother stood there silently. Her eyes, no longer filled with pain, held the fierce, quiet resolve of someone who had won. But that confrontation, that explosive revelation, was only the beginning. The case against Leonard Harris exploded into a national media frenzy. News channels, major newspapers, social media, everyone was talking about him. Not the successful entrepreneur anymore, but the mastermind behind a dark financial network. The charges were clear: money laundering, investment fraud, tax evasion, and accessory to the deaths of my own grandparents. My mother and I became the key witnesses at the trial. The day we stepped into that courtroom, my heart pounded, not from fear, but from the raw, potent realization that this was it. The final confrontation. The room was packed. Reporters, lawyers, my father's former business partners now looking at him with unfamiliar, accusing eyes. He sat in the defendant's chair, his expensive gray suit wrinkled, his hair noticeably whiter, his face gaunt. He didn't look at me or at Mom. He just stared down, his eyes empty, like a man who had lost everything, even his soul. When my mother took the stand, I saw her, stronger than I had ever witnessed. She recounted everything: the years of threats, the pressure to sign away her life, her gut-wrenching suspicions about my grandparents' deaths. Her voice didn't waver, didn't falter. All her pain, all her trauma, seemed to have forged into an unshakable strength. I had to fake my death to survive, she said, her gaze locking directly onto my father. But I didn't do this for revenge. I did it to protect my son, to protect what was left of my family. My father simply lowered his head further, offering no response, no defense. He had nothing left to say. When it was my turn, I stood. I looked at my father one last time. "You once said I wasn't good enough," I said, my voice calm but sharp, cutting through the silence of the courtroom. "But I don't need your approval. I just needed my mother to be safe, and for the truth to be revealed." He finally looked up. His eyes were hollow, as if his soul had truly abandoned his body. I don't know if he felt remorse, but I knew one thing: the man before me was no longer my father. The trial ended with a 30-year prison sentence. All of my father's assets were seized. Harris Capital officially went bankrupt. Several senior employees were investigated, and the dark financial network he'd meticulously built over years was utterly dismantled. The press called it the biggest scandal Portland had ever seen. But for me, it wasn't just a case. It was the end of a long, terrifying nightmare, and the beginning of a brand new chapter. After the trial, Mom and I were thrust into the spotlight. The media dubbed her the woman who returned from the dead, turning her story into a powerful symbol of resilience. But Mom, with her gentle yet resolute nature, chose to step away from all of it. She sold the old mansion, that grand house that had once been her home, but also, in her final years with my father, her prison. The proceeds from the sale, donated entirely to a foundation supporting women affected by domestic abuse and financial manipulation. "I don't need that house anymore," she told me, her voice soft. "It only reminds me of the days I lived in fear." She moved to a small, charming house on the Oregon coast, where she finally found peace. Planting wild daisies, painting. Each time I visit, I see her in the garden, hands covered in dirt, her smile as radiant as ever. She teaches local children how to paint, sharing stories about finding beauty in the simplest things. Watching her, I know she reclaimed herself. She was no longer just a shadow of Leonard Harris. I changed too. I left urban vision. I no longer wanted to be tied to large corporations. Instead, I opened my own small studio, Eleanor Designs, specializing in green spaces and community housing. My goal was simple, yet profound: to build homes where people felt safe, felt loved, not houses they feared returning to. Each project became a way to heal, not just for myself, but for others who had lived in houses full of wounds, like my mother and me. When Audrey finally learned the full, unbelievable truth about Mom and everything I had done, she was speechless, shocked. "Oliver, why didn't you tell me?" she asked, her eyes red with tears. I took her hand, apologized for keeping her in the dark, and explained that I couldn't risk pulling her into such danger. She hugged me, whispering, "I'm proud of you. But please, never hide anything from me again, okay?" I nodded, feeling an immense weight lift from my chest. Audrey and Nathan remained my greatest anchors. We visited Mom often. Trips to the Oregon coast became pure joy for our whole family. Nathan running through her daisy garden, laughing as she taught him how to draw a dinosaur. Audrey and Mom on the porch, sipping tea, chatting like old friends. Watching them, my heart swelled with warmth. This was my family. Not perfect, not glamorous, but filled with genuine love and sincerity. As time passed, the case of Leonard Harris faded into the background, but its echoes lingered deeply within me. Whenever I drove past the old Harris Capitol building, now just an empty concrete shell with a dusty for lease sign, I no longer felt hatred. Instead, a strange twinge of regret. Not for my father, but for the man he could have been. He had everything, a family, a career, the chance for a meaningful life. But he chose greed, betrayal, and ultimately, he lost himself. I began writing my story, not for the world to read, but for Nathan. One day, when he's older, I want him to read it, to understand that life isn't just about what you achieve, but how you face its challenges. And I wrote about the greatest lesson I learned. Justice isn't about retaliation. It's about daring to stand up for what's right, even when it means standing against your own family. Nathan, my little son, is my brightest light. I spend more time with him, teaching him about honesty, kindness, and protecting those who are vulnerable. One day, as we drew in Mom's garden, Nathan looked up at me. "Dad, is Grandma a superhero? She beat the bad guy." I laughed, ruffling his hair. "You're right, buddy. Grandma is a superhero, but not just because she beat the bad guy. She's a superhero because she never gave up, no matter how tough life got." Those afternoons with my family, under the fiery red sunsets of the Oregon coast, they taught me the true value of happiness. It doesn't lie in extravagant parties or towering skyscrapers or the approval of others. Happiness is sitting with Audrey, listening to her talk about a patient she helped. It's watching Nathan run and laugh, utterly carefree. It's looking at my mother, the woman who came back from the dead, and seeing her live true to herself. One evening, as we sat around the dinner table in Mom's seaside home, I looked up, at Audrey, at Nathan, at Mom. My voice was hoarse, but filled with emotion. I used to think happiness was about achieving success, about being recognized. But after everything, happiness is living without fear. It's being able to hold your head high and say, "I didn't betray my conscience, Dot." Mom took my hand, her eyes shining. "You made me proud, Oliver," she said. Audrey smiled, resting her hand on my shoulder. And Nathan, strawberry jam still on his lips, chimed in, "Dad's my superhero." We all burst into laughter. And in that moment, I knew, no matter how painful the past had been, we had found light. We had found each other. Now that you've heard my story, I'm genuinely curious. What would you have done if you got that text message? Would you have gone to the cemetery? Tell me what you think in the comments below. I truly want to know.